Coming up, the Bulls get back on track at home against the Cavs, and Kyrie takes over with Katie out for the Nets. This is Locked On Now NBA.
The biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
What's up, everybody? You are listening to Locked On Now NBA, local experts with the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Daniela Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. Our Locked On NBA hosts are here to help break down everything from Wednesday night in basketball. Last night's biggest game featured two small markets who hope to make deep playoff runs, and the reigning champs came out on top.
The biggest game.
The Stars showed up big time in a big matchup in Milwaukee last night. Giannis Antetokounmpo and Ja Morant both scored 33 points, but the reigning champs ended up on top at home against one of the best records in the West. Locked On Bucks and Locked On Grizzlies recap a fun one to watch in Milwaukee.
What's up, everyone? Kane Pittman here from Locked On Bucks. And Milwaukee pick up a win, and really a much-needed win for the Bucks. They came into this one losing 6 of their last 8 games, and things got a little shaky against Memphis here tonight, but they closed the door. Giannis came up with some key buckets down the stretch, despite the fact he fouled out with 39 seconds left. But Milwaukee win at 126 to 114. Giannis, 31 minutes, 33 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Just a standard garden variety dominant performance from Giannis in this one. And as I already mentioned, Milwaukee have had some struggles of late. Memphis were without Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, Dylan Brooks as well. So ultimately at home, this is a game you should win. This is a game that the Bucks have made a habit of taking care of business in recent seasons, but they haven't been doing it of late. During the game, they actually dropped down to the number 6 seed in the East, which is unfamiliar territory for this team. So they'll feel good about closing out this one. Middleton continued his pretty hot stretch of form here over the last few weeks as well. 27.7 rebounds and 7 assists. And this sets up a nice matchup against the Chicago Bulls. First time they've played this season. Can you believe that? The Central Division rivals. That's going to be a lot of fun on Friday night. But we're going to break down the game against the Grizzlies. Frank will join me for post-game Locked On Bucks. Join us wherever you get your podcasts or now on YouTube.
The Grizzlies lose a tough matchup tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks without some of their best rotation players, 126 to 114. Sean Coleman here with the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Without Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, and Kyle Anderson, the Grizzlies knew going in tonight it was going to be tough, but they were able to stay close for most of the game. Giannis was Giannis, setting the tone early, helping the Bucks come back from an early deficit, and though the Grizzlies were able to keep close, they never could quite catch up. On a broader scale, a big reason why they couldn't in this game was because they were 9 of 40 from 3 and 17 of 25 from the line. They have struggled mightily from the free throw line and from beyond the arc this month. Those are areas this Grizzlies team is going to have to improve in for them to truly be a contender come playoff time. But on a more positive note, the reason why they were able to at least keep the game close, despite their struggles from 3 and despite their struggles from the free throw line, 62 combined points. If you go back to a game earlier against Utah this year, go back to their wins over Phoenix and Brooklyn on the road, and now in this game against Milwaukee, it's either Ja and Desmond Bane getting close to 60 points or Jaren and Ja getting close to 60 points. And the big takeaway from that is that the 3 most important players to the Grizzlies' present and future, when they need to, when they have to, against the best teams in the NBA, they are stepping up and taking over. And most of the time, it leads to wins, but it at least makes them competitive at all times. That's a very, very good sign that this Grizzlies team is getting step by step closer to being a contender. We'll have this and much more on the post-game edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.
The Brooklyn Nets played without Kevin Durant in Durant's hometown of Washington, D.C., but Kyrie Irving made up for KD's absence with 30 points in a narrow win. Locked On Nets tells you more after Brooklyn took a 1-point victory out of Washington.
Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets here, coming at you after a 119-118 victory by the Nets over the Wizards. Brooklyn survives a late push by Washington in the fourth quarter. It gets a little frenzied at the end, back and forth. Ultimately, the Nets come away with the victory. Kyrie Irving looks fully back, 30 points, 7 assists in his 38 minutes, took 23 shots overall. In the end, the Nets put up a ton of points in the first half. They struggled a little bit more in the second half to find good shots, allowing Washington to get back in the game. But ultimately, the Nets pull off a pretty crucial road win against Washington here. They need all the wins they can get with Kevin Durant on the shelf. We are going to be talking about it all over on the Locked On Nets podcast.
Atlanta Hawks star Trae Young put on a show against the Minnesota Timberwolves last night. He was dribbling between opponents' legs, dropped 37 points and 14 assists. Atlanta used a huge third quarter to secure the victory. Locked On Hawks recaps the win.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland. The Atlanta Hawks get their second straight victory and their second straight victory at home with a nice come-from-behind victory over the Minnesota Timberwolves on Wednesday. The Hawks trailed by 16 points in the first half, but ended up putting together an awesome third quarter. It started with a 20-2 run at the outset coming out of the locker room, and the intensity was noticeably different, especially on defense, where Nick McMillan credited that with the turnaround. I would definitely agree, although the offense was awesome as well, and Trae Young was lights out. Young did not score until late in the first half, and still ended up with 37 points and 14 assists. He was brilliant after halftime, trickling in the third quarter, and the Hawks had a fantastic second half to turn a 16-point deficit into what became a very large double-digit lead at different times in the second half before they had to kind of hold on for dear life down the stretch. So we'll have much more on this game, but a nice win for the Hawks, their second straight, and we'll get into all of that on the Locked On Hawks podcast.
Coming up, Joel Embiid put up a career high to carry the Sixers past the Magic. This is Locked On Now NBA. It's a new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, or maybe even better. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and most Built Bars contain only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And there are so many different flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many more. In fact, Built is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check them out at built.com to see what's new. Again, go to built.com. We have a special offer code for you. Use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Welcome back to Locked On Now NBA. Thanks for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. I'm your host, Daniela Bruce, with everything you need to know from around the NBA last night. Let's go back to our local experts to fill you in on anything you may have missed from Wednesday night in basketball, including our best performance in Philadelphia.
The best performance.
Hold up.
Joel Embiid tied a career high on Wednesday night by scoring 50 points against the Orlando Magic. The process added 12 rebounds and a dominant performance. Our Locked On Sixers host tells you more about it.
This is Kai Carlin from Locked On 76ers here from the Wells Fargo Center after the 76ers knocked off the Orlando Magic 123-110 thanks to an absolutely phenomenal night from Joel Embiid. The big fella had 50 points on 7 for 23 shooting. He had 20 points in the first quarter. He had 20 of Philadelphia's 25 points in the opening quarter to really lift the Sixers to a big night. He then added 23 more points in the third quarter to get the job done. That overcame a big night from Mo Bamba on the side of the Orlando Magic, who had a career high of his own with 32 points. He knocked down 7 triples. He had 28 points in the first half. But the story of the night continues to be Joel. The fact that Embiid has been able to throw the Sixers on his back despite so much adversity, not having Ben Simmons here and all the injuries that the team continues to sustain, he's been absolutely terrific throughout this whole run for Philadelphia. Up next for the Sixers, they're going to stay here at home and they're going to take on the Los Angeles Clippers on Friday.
The Boston Celtics shot nearly 50 threes against the Hornets on Wednesday and didn't make nearly enough of them to beat the Hornets. Our Locked On Celtics host tells you how that and a list of other mishaps led to a Boston loss.
John Corrales here at the TD Garden after the Boston Celtics 111-102 loss to the Charlotte Hornets. The Celtics shot 30% from 3, yet they kept firing them up there. 14 for 46. Not great. Defensively, a poor performance. They gave up 111 points. They could not stop the Charlotte Hornets either. No Robert Williams, no Marcus Smart, but that shouldn't be an excuse. The Celtics were getting to the rim early, and then they sort of abandoned that. They played a lot of Enes Kanter, which I don't understand, and I don't think those minutes went particularly well. But it's another performance to be expected from the Boston Celtics. Just when we think they have an opportunity to turn things around and make a little bit of a run, they put a disappointing performance like this out there, and it's right back down to 500, and that seems like where this team is going to be. I will be talking about it on the Locked On Celtics podcast, so make sure you're subscribed and watch the show on YouTube.
The Chicago Bulls got back into the win column thanks to a big night by MVP candidate DeMar DeRozan. DeRozan scored 30 points on the way to Chicago, snapping a 4-game losing streak at home. And our Locked On Bulls recaps the bounce-back win.
What's up, Bulls Nation? Matt Beck here from Locked On Bulls with your post-game takeaway. Well, the Bulls finally end their 4-game losing streak by snapping Cleveland's 5-game winning streak. The Bulls beat the Cavs 117-104 the final in Chicago tonight. After a few inefficient shooting games, DeMar DeRozan was back to his MVP candidate caliber self with another 30-point night on 14 of 24. Also, some timely assists. He had 7 dimes on the night, none bigger than his drive and dish to a Vooch 3 in the corner. Nikola Vucevic has been struggling with his shot all season. He was 2 of 13 in the Bulls' last game. And despite his efficiency in the paint thus far in this game tonight, he was 0 of 4 from downtown before a dagger 3 finally sunk the Cavs for good. Vooch with another double-double, still top 10 in the NBA this season in that category with 24 and 12. And another shout-out to the Bulls' second-round gem, Ayo Dosunmu, who is still in that starting lineup with Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball out, both with knees. Ayo tonight, 18 points, 8 dimes, and he also had a beauty cutting baseline to feed Vooch for another easy 2 as the Bulls were putting things away in the fourth quarter. Big win for the Bulls as they keep pace in the now suddenly very tight top of the Eastern Conference. The Heat, the Nets, and the Bucks all also getting W's tonight. Speaking of the Bucks, that's up next for the Bulls as they head to Milwaukee on Friday. For a full breakdown of this win over the Cavs, check out our Thursday episode of Locked On Bulls with me and my guy, Big Dave. Locked On Bulls, your team every day.
The Houston Rockets got one of the biggest wins of their season on the road on Wednesday by beating the Utah Jazz. Houston picked up a big night from young star point guard, and Locked On Rockets tells you everything he liked to see out of the young prospect in the rest of the Houston roster in that win.
Huge road win for the Houston Rockets over the Utah Jazz. What's up? Jackson Gatlin here for over at Locked On Rockets. Kevin Porter Jr. continues his clutch performances, hitting a huge 3 late to help seal the game against the Utah Jazz for the Houston Rockets. And the development on the point guard side of things for KPJ, 8 assists, just 1 turnover in this game. Exactly the type of performance you want to see from Kevin Porter Jr. as the potential future point guard of the Houston Rockets. And how did the Rockets solve the anomaly of the stifle tower, Rudy Gobert? They attacked him incessantly in the second half. They got him involved in a lot of the actions, and that's what led to one of the game-winning buckets late for the Houston Rockets, a cut by Jae'Sean Tate. They got Rudy Gobert involved in the action. He had to rotate, and it led to a wide-open dunk, which led to an and-one opportunity for Jae'Sean Tate late in this game. So we're going to break it all down for you right over at Locked On Rockets.
The Los Angeles Clippers took it to overtime, but couldn't overcome a huge night from Nikola Jokic. Locked On Clippers tells you how LA ended up on the wrong side of a 40-point night from the Denver big man.
What is going on, Clips fans? Chuck Mockler here, one half of the hosting duo over at Locked On Clippers, coming at you after yet another epic Nuggets-Clippers matchup. The Clippers lost this one in overtime to Denver 130-128. Man, Ivica Zubac was absolutely electric. He had 32 points, a career high. 18 of those came in the fourth quarter in overtime. Hats off to Zoo. Reggie Jackson might be back on track. He had over 20 points and a season high in assists. This was an emotional roller coaster the whole time. The Clippers were down, then they were up. We saw fantastic bench minutes from Eric Bledsoe and Brandon Boston Jr. Not a whole lot to be mad at in this one, considering the reigning MVP had almost a 50-piece and some questionable calls, maybe go or not go his way. All we can do is move on to the 76ers and hope we bring the same fight and energy to Philadelphia.
Domantas Sabonis used a triple-double to help the Indiana Pacers take down the Los Angeles Lakers last night to snap a 4-game losing streak. With more on how Indiana did it and beat LeBron and the Lakers in the process, our Locked On Pacers host has more.
The Indiana Pacers beat the Los Angeles Lakers in Los Angeles. It's the first road win for the Pacers since November 22nd. It's a long time coming for the Pacers to get a road win, and who else to do it against than LeBron and the Lakers? And this game was all Karis LeVert, who had over 20 points in the fourth quarter alone. He finished with 30 points and 8 rebounds to lead the Pacers in scoring. He was incredible when it mattered. Domantas Sabonis had a triple-double, 20, 12, and 10 for the two-time All-Star. Malcolm Brogdon returned from his Achilles injury with 19 points and 6 assists. Really, just a beautifully balanced game from the Pacers, who were playing their best against the 2020 champs. And LeBron, a 30-point, 12-rebound night. He was great. The Lakers did not get enough from much of their other guys outside of Talen Horton-Tucker. So impressive win for the Pacers, who've been longing for a road win, and really an impressive win for a while now. We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
And that's all for today's Locked On Now NBA. Thank you to all of our Locked On NBA hosts for keeping us up to date with everything that happened in basketball yesterday. And thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Now that you're done here, head over to Locked On NBA or your local team's Locked On podcast. I'm Daniela Bruce, and this has been Locked On Now.